Well, let's discuss this more now. We're joined by Mary Ziegler. She's a law professor at Florida State University and the author of the book Abortion and the Law in America, Roe v. Wade to the Present. Professor Ziegler, good evening to you there in Florida. Thank you very much for being with us. The Biden administration is suing the state of Texas, but the legislation in Texas has been intentionally written so that the state isn't enacting the laws itself. It becomes a civil matter. Does that ultimately mean the legal challenge by the Biden administration is set to fail?
Not necessarily, but there are pretty powerful obstacles in front of it, both because, as was the case with abortion providers who challenged SB 8 before, it's not clear if the Biden administration is suing the right people. It's also not clear if the Biden administration can identify enough of an injury to have standing, which is another requirement under U.S. law. So it's not clear that the law will fail, but it does seem to have kind of an uphill battle.
How closely are other states watching what's happening in Texas?
I think quite closely. I think initially after SB 8 was passed, a whole slew of Republican governors announced plans to copy SB 8. Since then, that interest has cooled some, I think, both because it seems easier to bring challenges to the law than first seemed to be the case because an abortion provider has stepped forward and said he violated the law, which will open the door to legal challenges. The other thing that's happened is that the plaintiffs who have actually invoked the law so far have not been the kind of people the Right to Life movement might have chosen. They've been two disbarred attorneys, neither of whom identifies as opposed to abortion. So I think it's not, if you let anyone sue, you can't control the message. So there's been, I think, more of a sense among conservative governors that it's better to wait to see if the Supreme Court will reverse Roe by the summer of 2022.
Well, tell us more about this. How does this directly impact the future of Roe v. Wade?
Well, the Supreme Court has a case in front of it now out of Mississippi banning abortion at 15 weeks gestation. The reason that's a big deal is that the court could have taken less explosive cases. Instead, it took this one, and probably with the intent of upholding this law. And the reason that's significant is that Roe v. Wade says there's a right to choose abortion until fetal viability, which is usually around the 24th week, a full 9 weeks after Mississippi's law takes effect. So in order to uphold Mississippi's law, then the court either has to reverse Roe v. Wade in its entirety or change viability as the dividing line, which would put Roe on shaky ground indeed.
It's nearly half a century since Roe v. Wade was passed. Why is this coming to a head now?
It's a combination of changes to the Republican Party and changes to the Supreme Court. The Right to Life movement since at least the 1980s has been focused on transforming the court and setting the stage for an overruling of Roe. The other thing that's changed is that the Republican Party has increasingly moved away from a strategy of appealing to the median voter or a voting majority and is instead focused on turnout, energizing the base, and shrinking the electorate. And so abortion policies like the one you see implemented in Texas, which don't tend to poll well and don't tend to be popular in the United States, that isn't off-putting to the GOP anymore because the entire strategy is based on energizing the people who like these kinds of outcomes rather than appealing to the largest number of American voters.
In 2016, President Trump promised that he would appoint a Supreme Court justice and would overturn Roe v. Wade. Is the former president about to get his way?
Quite likely. I mean, I don't know if he's about to get his way in 2022 necessarily. I would expect to see the Supreme Court kind of try to soften the blow for American voters, kind of take one or two judicial decisions to make the case that Roe should go. So I think we'd be more likely to see that happening in 2023 or 2024. But I think President Trump will get his wish. It's just a matter of time.
Okay, really good to get your insights. Professor Mary Ziegler from Florida State University, thank you very much for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.